streaming us. And just let me know when I know it takes a minute to go to stream it, so we'll just give you a second to launch that, and then we will get started. It's okay, Mandy. If it doesn't work too, that's fine too.
We're getting there. It's coming.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming to learn about becoming a CASA volunteer. As I mentioned, I'm creative director. I'm going to work through this slide presentation, and also part of it will our facilitator, Eric Kornfeld, who does a wonderful job at facilitating our pre-service training. We'll talk about exactly what that entails. So we're going to work through a slideshow so you can learn about becoming a CASA volunteer. And then afterwards, we will open it up to questions. So thank you again for joining us. So we'll go ahead and get started. So Eric, if you'll just send us to the first slide as we work through.
We'll start off with a video.
All right, let's go.
Growing up is tough for a kid. They have school and homework, practices and games, there are doctor's appointments and detention halls. The making friends and the keeping friends, discovering who they are and who they aren't. There's so much to learn. There's this whole world out there, right here. These times are transforming in someone's story, and they can really be quite chaotic. That chaos of being a child only increases when abuse and neglect fill their home. The normal winds of chaos are now a storm, and sometimes, when the storm is so great, a child must be removed from their home. And this is a really tough day. It's complicated, and it's painful. When a child is removed from their home because of abuse or neglect, they leave their normal and they enter foster care. The court sends them to a new place, a new home, often to a new school with new people, new everything. And all of these new things aim at a better life for the child. They aim to help in the healing process for the family. But it's still tough. They still have the school activities, the doctor's appointments, and the lessons to learn. But now court dates, visits with parents, and check-ins with social workers quickly bombard the calendar. And there's the pain of separation from what they know and where they feel comfortable. There are hundreds of children in our city who experience chaotic days like this, weeks like this, years like this. And these days, weeks, and years are difficult. They're exhausting and isolating. They're really tough. But there are ways to help. Ways to bear the burdens the child is carrying. Ways to make the days less tough. These children need to feel more supported. They need someone constant who is on their team. Someone who is fighting for their best amidst all the shuffle. And a CASA volunteer provides this help. A court-appointed special advocate helps bear these burdens. They are the constant amidst the chaos. In the middle of all the shuffle and uncertainty, they know the child. There are still tough days, but now there's someone standing up for the child, day in, day out. Someone who knows both the biological and foster parents. Someone who meets with the teachers, doctors, and social workers to ensure the child's needs are being met. Someone who speaks for the child's best interest in court. Someone who the judge counts on for insight. Someone who cares about the child and just lets them be a kid. Someone who is there for the tough days, the great days, and the in-between days. This someone is so important. This someone is a CASA volunteer. And there are hundreds of children in our city waiting for a CASA volunteer. They're waiting for someone to speak up for them. They're waiting for someone to help weather the storm. Each child in foster care needs this support, this someone to count on. Be this someone for a child in foster care. Be their advocate. Be a powerful voice for their best interest. Be a CASA volunteer.
Wonderful. And we love to just show that video because it's a great overview of what a CASA volunteer is. And I love that visual of a person that is standing with a child in the midst of their storm. It's here in Chatham County, we have around 387 children in foster care right now. In order to enter foster care, a child has experienced some level of abuse or neglect. Right now, we're serving 64% of those children, and our goal is to serve a full 100%, but we need more volunteers. There has been a decrease in the number of children coming into foster care since the pandemic, as less eyes on children with the schools being closed. However, over the last month, we've seen a steady increase, and it's why you saw that news story and you saw whatever Facebook post, why we're working really hard to fill our last class of the year so that we can continue to make sure every single child that enters foster care has an advocate fighting for them. So, on the next slide. So we love this quote by Nelson Mandela: "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." And to all of you that have joined our informational session here via Zoom, or for those that are on Facebook, you're here because you believe that our children are, to quote the late great Whitney Houston, our future, right? That our children are our hope, and we need to, in order to create a society that is good and just, we need to make sure that our most vulnerable are protected. And so that is what we do here at Savannah Chatham CASA. So what is a CASA volunteer? As you saw in that video, gave a good overview, but our CASA volunteers are those committed community members who go through some rigorous training, which you'll hear a little bit more about from Eric, who then after they complete their training, are appointed by the Chatham County Juvenile Court. So you're sworn in by a judge, and then you will then be assigned a case, and you'll have a court order for that case, and you'll advocate for the best interest of that child. What makes us different than, say, a case manager through the Department of Family and Children's Services or a child's attorney is that we are advocating for the best interest, not necessarily what the child wants, but what a child needs. Those of you with children, you understand that there's a difference at times between what a child needs and what a child wants. What makes us different than the case manager exists to ensure that a child has everything that they need as provided by the state, but case managers with the Department of Family and Children's Services often have many, many cases and many children that they need to visit and work with. And so they are overburdened, and we exist to ensure that we can provide those children support and make sure that they're getting everything that they need. But where the rubber meets the road is where we then tell the judge what we believe that a child needs, what is in the child's best interest, because in the end, the person that decides what happens with the child, whether they go home to their family, whether they are adopted, is the judge. So a CASA volunteer spends time monthly with their assigned children. It could be one child that you'd be assigned to, or maybe a sibling group. You have access, because of that court order that I already mentioned, you have access to all the children's records. So you can take your court order and go to their doctor, go to their school, and ask the necessary questions. We encourage every CASA volunteer to speak to as many people as possible. You're an investigator. You're finding out what's going on with this child's life. And the most important part is that a child, it has every aspect of that child's life is taken care of. For those of you that have children, you understand that sometimes you have to fight, right? You might have to fight to make sure a child gets the proper education that they need, or the medical support that they need. And a child in foster care often doesn't have someone, but a committed volunteer, somebody who's focused solely on that child, can fill in that gap and make sure that that child's needs are being met educationally, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. So a child with a CASA, the benefit of a CASA is that a child is twice as likely to find a safe and permanent home. So about 50% or more of the children that enter foster care in Chatham County will be reunified with their family. Often their families are experiencing a multitude of things, right? Sometimes it's their own generational trauma. It might be substance use disorder that needs to be treated. There might be undiagnosed and untreated medical or mental health issues. And so often a child will go back home, and as a CASA volunteer, we help to make sure all those pieces are met so the child can return home quicker, because a child should not be separated from their family longer than necessary. And if a child cannot go home, if reunification is not a possibility, it's our job to help push the system so that a child is matched with the right family, and hopefully it could be a family member or a fictive kin, you know, your auntie that's really your mom's best friend, somebody that you already have familiarity with, and or it might be an adoptive home. A child with a CASA is half as likely to enter the foster care system because we work really hard to make sure we get it right and that the court gets it right and that the judge can make the decision based on all the necessary information. Our judges will often say that it's the CASA volunteer that knows more than anybody else, and it's their court reports that they read that gives them the most insight into what's going on in a child's life. A child with a CASA is more likely to succeed in school because there's somebody meeting with those teachers or counselors, someone that's fighting for their IEP, which is that individualized educational plan. Many of our children have trauma or other special needs, and they can qualify for additional support in the school system, but somebody needs to advocate for that, and that's what a CASA volunteer does. And when reunification is a possibility, it's those families with a CASA that is connecting them to the resources that they need so that they can be reunified. And often it's a CASA volunteer fighting to keep the child in one placement, because a child can go into foster care and be in one healthy placement and no further harm will be caused that child. But every time we move that child from another home to another home to another home, we're further traumatizing that child. And a CASA volunteer fights for consistency in that child's life. CASA is a wise investment for taxpayers because we utilize volunteers to do the advocacy and to reduce the amount of time a child spends in care. 1 year of CASA advocacy costs less than 1 month of foster care. And I know all the things I'm talking about sound a little overwhelming. How am I supposed to know what to say to the court or what a child is entitled to? But we have staff members that support up to 30 CASA volunteers and then able to serve around 75 children. So you have the support that you need to direct you and connect you with those resources as a CASA volunteer, and you make a greater impact because of the model of CASA. And this is, I mean, we just like to live these quotes, and you're a hero if you sign up to be a CASA and want to help our children. All right, and so I'm going to hand it over to Eric to talk about what the training looks like. I know that it sounds a little overwhelming when we talk about advocating for a child and what all that would be, and you're like, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a case manager, I'm not a social worker, how would I know these things? Well, Eric is going to answer that question.
Thank you so much, Kate. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric, and I'm the pre-service training coordinator. So if you choose to join the CASA cause, we are getting started very soon at the end of October with our very next CASA training class. During training, you'll go through 40 hours of experiences in order to prepare you to become a CASA volunteer. 15 of those hours are going to be face-to-face, kind of like we're doing right now on Zoom, where we have discussions, we ask questions, we participate in activities. The other 15 hours are self-directed online. There's an online learning management system where you'll kind of do similar stuff, except it's on your own time. So that's 30 hours of training that you'll go through over the course of 6 weeks. There's an additional 10 hours of court observation that you'll be participating in. We ask for you to observe 10 hours of observational court, where you'll fill out a form, write your observations about court, reflections, questions you might want to ask if you were in the courtroom yourself, and then you turn that in order to get your total of training up to 40 hours. Once you finish your 40 hours of training and you've been working tirelessly as a CASA volunteer for a period of 12 months, you are then expected to do 12 hours of in-service every year. During this training, you'll learn more about the child welfare system, the role that you will play as a court-appointed special advocate. You'll look internally to identify your own biases and come to really understand what is in a child's best interest. During training, you'll also fill out a whole bunch of paperwork. This is the really fun stuff. There's an application that you'll fill out, which you can do on our website. You'll also be asked to provide 3 references who will then reply and give an affirmation about your character and your experience. You'll do an interview with CASA staff. We're doing those virtually right now as well. And you'll also consent to do fingerprints, criminal history search, sex offender registry search. We verify your social security number and check your name against the child abuse registry. So once you've done your 40 hours of training, you've completed all your background screening, you've done your hours of court observation, we've spent 30 hours together online talking about what it means to be a CASA and how to best advocate for children. And then the big event comes. You stand in front of a judge, raise your right hand, and you are officially sworn in as a court-appointed special advocate for children in foster care here in Chatham County. If you are interested in joining, our very first day of class, our orientation is going to be October 24th. We do still have some seats available in that class, and we would absolutely love to have you. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Yes, and so our training is it's initially the most intensive part of about becoming a CASA, and that's by design, right? There's a lot of information. You get to meet and get to know the staff really well because we are your support system as you start this. So it can seem a little overwhelming, but it is worth it, and you get to experience a volunteer experience that's not like any other. It's not, while there are a lot of wonderful volunteer opportunities in Chatham County, being a CASA volunteer is the one that you actually get to see up close how you will change a child's story. You get to know their family, you get to know that child, you get to be that hope in the midst of a really stormy time in a child's life. As we mentioned, this training will begin October 24th. You do need to be 21 or older to be a CASA volunteer. And also, if you do not live in Chatham County, there are other CASAs in our area that you can participate in as well. So there's different CASAs in each county. Our CASA is only Chatham County, so everything that happens is at our Chatham County Juvenile Court. And the other question that I know will come up before we stop live streaming and we allow everybody in this call to ask other questions is, how much time does it take to be a CASA volunteer? Well, we told you what the training looks like, right? And that's pretty intensive. But monthly, it's about 10 to 12 hours that you would spend as a CASA volunteer. You visit that child once a month. Unless the child lives 2 or more hours away, then you will visit them less. But we ask that you try to visit them at least once a month. You meet with them or talk with them virtually or on the phone at least once a month. Because how can you give recommendations if you're not getting to know that child, right? And then the only thing that is, while you're a CASA volunteer, that is within, that is a strict time frame, is when there's court hearings. You're expected to attend those court hearings, but you typically know about them 6 months in advance. Otherwise, visiting your child, talking to schools, all of that stuff can be done on your own schedule. So it's very flexible in that way outside of that court hearing. Mandy and Tim, is there anything you'd like to add before we stop live streaming and allow everybody to ask questions?
I think you covered it all, Kate.
I would just say that it warms my heart when I see volunteers take their time out of their lives to help these children, and I think that's what makes me feel good about this organization, is that this is real change that you'll be making. So I hope that you take in consideration of that you'll be making real change in this community with these children, because it helps me to keep going as a person, to know that I'm not just this is not about me, it's about them.
Right. Yes, we absolutely center the child everything is about the child within our organization and centering that child and ensuring we're doing right by that child. So I'll just leave you with one story of a CASA volunteer. We recently we had a CASA who had a case for about 2 to 3 years. Mary's case, right? She had about 3 years, Mandy. And so she had a little girl that a baby who entered foster care in infancy, and she had drugs in her system when she was born. Her mother had substance use disorder. Her father also struggled with substance use. It was moving towards termination of parental rights, meaning the child would not return home to the family, but would be adopted. The child was in an adoptive home, but the child had some severe behavioral issues. She is a beautiful little girl. We all as a staff, we all got to know her because there was times she would hang out in our office while they were looking for a new placement, because that original adoptive home, because of behavioral issues and whatever, and the foster family chose not to move forward with adoption. And in 4 years, that little girl bounced from foster home to foster home to foster home. The system, in a lot of ways, really failed that little girl. I mean, she had behavioral issues because she was born with drugs in her systems, and as we know, that can cause all kinds of issues for a child. But the one constant as she went from foster home to foster home, and different case managers and attorneys, was her CASA volunteer who fought for her. And our CASA volunteer, throughout the entire time, kept her mind opened and challenged her own biases. And halfway through the time with this child in foster care, the child's father turned his life around, got a house, started fighting and working hard. He originally was willing to place the child for adoption because he wasn't ready to be a parent, and he didn't want her to wait. And he saw these potential amazing adoptive families. But when he saw that his daughter was not getting the permanency that she felt she deserved, he worked really hard to turn his life around, and address his own substance use, and get a job, get a home that was safe for the child. And our CASA volunteer supported him and cheered him on through all of it. And just in the middle of the pandemic, Dad was living in another state and did everything that he could, and our CASA volunteer advocated for him. In the middle of the pandemic, this little girl was able to go home to her father and her sibling that she never had met, and she got to have a permanent and safe family after, Mandy, how many different foster homes was she in her 4 years?
Total of 7 foster homes in 4 years. Yeah.
And the pictures, and the dad still sends pictures to our CASA volunteer, who shares them with us, and we can see the love, the happiness with her dog. She's got this new wonderful dog, and riding in a plane the first time to go be, and she was with her father. It's a beautiful story of redemption and healing, and it was a CASA volunteer that helped to make that happen and support that child. So it was a beautiful story. All right, so we're going to come off of Facebook. Mandy, if you'll turn off Facebook, thank you. And we are going to open this to all of you on here. If you have any questions about what it is to be a CASA volunteer, that we can answer for you.
Is the CASA volunteer ever expected to actually take the child to like a doctor's visit or something?
No, great question. So our CASA volunteers are not allowed to transport or be alone with a child. So whenever you might have, we encourage you to have private conversations with the child, but you're never supervising the child or alone with the child, and you never transport the child. So you're not expected to do that, but we do encourage you to go to a doctor's appointment or go speak with the doctors. You can meet them there and participate, because that's great ways to get information. You're part investigator as a CASA volunteer, and so any way that you can get information to make sure that our judges, who have the hardest decision, I'm thankful I'm not the one that has to decide how a child's where a child lives and who will be their family, and the judges, you getting that information is very helpful for them.
How structured is it? Like if you're meeting with the biological parents, and are you going to their home? Are there places you're meeting them? How does that work?
So that is varies with every single case. Some cases there may not even be biological family for you to reach out. Others there might be quite a bit. And we encourage you to work with your coordinator to find what's comfortable for you. Sometimes it might just be phone calls. Sometimes we do encourage if there are visitations. So especially if we're moving towards reunification, if there's visitations that you occasionally go observe those and see how the children are interacting with their biological family so you can provide that. But it is it's not structured in that way because every single case is so unique. And so our staff is filled with social workers. Tim was a probation officer. So we have an array of staff that can provide you the support to make sure it's what you're comfortable with and what works for you and that family. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, I have a quick question. So my first question is, I live in Effingham, but I'm totally willing to work in Chatham. So is that a problem or anything that you guys have issues with someone lives out of county?
No, so we have no issues with that. We just always want to make sure there is a CASA in that serves the Effingham County. So it is completely up to you. We do have quite a few CASAs that live outside of Chatham County, but they work in Chatham County, so they prefer to be a CASA in Chatham County. And then we also, our kids, and this was something I did not mention, our kids are placed all over the state. We don't have enough foster homes. And so we do have children that are they're Chatham County children that are placed in other counties. And so, so like when we know that you live in another county, well, if we find a case that's in there, we might be like, oh, yes, that's a perfect case for Maria because she lives out in Effingham County. And we always ask too, if you travel, if you have family in different parts of Georgia, we like to know that because we know that you'll be more likely to go visit a child if they were placed in that area. One of our biggest needs is CASA volunteers that are able and willing to travel because so many of our children are placed out of county. But
Awesome,
all
thank
the
you.
court hearings are here in Chatham County. So as
Awesome.
long as
And then
you're able to come to Chatham County to go to court, that's good. Right now it's all
Okay.
virtual, so it's very easy to get anywhere.
Okay. And then my second question is, so I'm definitely wanting to sign up to start with the group that starts on the 24th. I do know that I have a trip that I have to go out of town with my husband the first weekend in November. So what does it look like? Let's say I have to miss one Saturday. Is it like just wait till the next group or go ahead and sign up and virtual? How do you do that?
That's a good question, Maria. So as long as you know there's only one class that you're going to miss, just communicate that with me at orientation. We'll set up an appointment to do a makeup. If you have to miss more than one session, I would invite you to try to join a future class, but just one class we can definitely do a makeup for.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your question.
And all of this, I think he mentioned the slide too, but all of it is virtual as well. Like I'm in DC right now. Isn't that amazing that we can be virtual and do all of this? So for those of you that are, that might have to travel or something come up, you can pop in from wherever.
Yeah.
And then I have just one last question. So I'm assuming most of the people that do this probably have full-time jobs too, as do I. So, and I do work from home, so it's a little flexible, with being able to attend things. But are there typically a lot of court hearings? Because I know, like you said, those are set, you have to be there at that time. So how often does that come up usually?
I'll let Mandy take that one.
So usually court is about every 6 months, and you will know about those hearings at least 6 months ahead of time so that you can plan for those. I will say when the case first comes into care, there are more hearings, more back-to-back or more frequent. So that would be something, but you would always know about those beforehand, at least a month before the hearing so that you can plan for those at the beginning of the case. But once it gets a little further on, you would know about it at least 6 months ahead of time.
Right.
Okay, great.
And you'll always have a staff member that will attend court hearings with you. And so if it's an emergency hearing or a hearing that you can't attend because of work obligations and you didn't know about it in advance, your coordinator will go to that court hearing, but you will be responsible making sure that your coordinator has all the information they need so they can advocate in the way that you would want them to advocate, because you're the expert on the case, we are not.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I'd also like to add to that, just to reiterate that the training period and the beginning of the case really is the most time intensive part of your time as a CASA. You're spending 6 hours per week at a minimum on the training, plus you're expected to do 10 hours of court observation, which also happens during business hours. So this is a pretty big time commitment up front. So just consider that. What is October and November going to look like for you? Make sure you really have the time to commit to it, and know that going forward, you're going to court every few months. You're visiting your child once a month. You're not expected to have these things turned around so quickly. Training is intense by design. And we recognize that, and we're going to work with you to make sure that you can get it done.
And just, since you mentioned the court hearings during training are during work hours, and you'll have about 8 weeks to attend 10 hours of court hearings. And so we give you the court docket, and you sign up for different court hearings. It is all virtual, so if you're working from home, you can just take your lunch break and go to a court hearing virtually. So that's helpful right now. It is a little frustrating, court hearings, because it is all virtual, and so things can sometimes get delayed. But we will kind of give you best practices for you to be able to do that. But so you need 10 hours within 8 weeks to just observe court, and all you're doing is sitting on a Zoom like this with your camera off. They can't see you, so you don't even have to look real pretty. You just or real handsome, but you just are sitting there listening and watching how a CASA advocates in the court.
We got a good question in the chat from Angel about how much time off work would you think we would have to take in order to satisfy court observations and attend court hearings. We've kind of been talking about it. Court hearings, once you are a CASA, you know about them well in advance. And so you may want to take maybe a half day off. Some hearings last 15 minutes, some hearings last 3 hours. So it's really important just to set a good chunk of time aside so that you can spend that time and dedicate it toward that child during this really important time. During training, it is a little different because, again, hearings last anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours. It's impossible to know really what it's going to look like. So if you do have to take time off from work, or you need to schedule it really intentionally, I invite you to reach out to Mandy, who can look at the full schedule and maybe give you an idea of what would be an optimal day if you could take the whole day off that you'd be most likely to have hearing after hearing. Although you'd likely need at least a day and a half to get your 8 hours in. When it comes to court observations, we allow you to count waiting time. So if the hearing doesn't start until 9:30 and it was supposed to start at 9, those 30 minutes aren't wasted. We respect your time. We just ask if you spend 8 hours waiting and 2 hours in court observation, maybe you watch a couple extra hearings. We're going to be flexible because we have to right now.
Right. It's a new normal that we're all kind of working in. And we do have suspicion that the judges are going to keep virtual court as something that may just exist for all of the future, which is helpful too. But it is a bummer that you all don't get to go to court and kind of experience it as much in that way. But again, we understand work obligations, but if you have a job that's completely not flexible at all, meaning you can't take off a day here or there then it may not be the right fit for you. But those of you might want to reach out to your employers too, because many employers do give paid time off for volunteering. So if you're not aware of that, should ask them, or at least put a little bug in their ear, so that maybe they'll start a program like that. I know that in my previous corporate world life that we did get that kind of time off. So, but we have teachers that manage to be CASA volunteers, and they figure it out. And that is a very, they got to be there, right? So there are people that make this work, but a little flexibility is helpful in this role.
I'll add to that, if you tell your supervisor you're going to be a court-appointed special advocate for children in foster care, that might give you a little bit more flexibility. I've actually heard from some of our volunteers that they don't really get time off, but when they told their supervisor what they were doing, they were more flexible with them.
It's for the children. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I apologize. I had a little technical difficulties earlier. Where is this meeting supposed to be at for training and orientation?
It's in a Zoom, just like this. So it'll be a Zoom. So it'll be 9 to 12 on Saturday mornings via Zoom.
Yes.
The orientation usually is about an hour and a half. The first week is not a full 3 hours, but all the other weeks will be a full 3 hours. And from your home, safety of your home.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I will add, we're skipping the weekend of Thanksgiving. So our last day of class will, fun fact, be the day after Kate's birthday on November
It
5th.
is the day after my birthday.
Maria, you had another question?
Yeah, another quick question. So I know we're required to meet with the child at least once a month. Are we able to meet with them and the families more frequently, or is it just once a month and that's it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Whatever you think you need and want and whatever. I mean, it also, every case is so different. You might have this foster family that wants you to be included in everything, or you might have a family member that's like, I don't know you. Like, so you've got to figure out and build that relationship, right? And so every case is so different, and we will work with you. But our coordinators have almost seen everything. Oh, Genevieve asked, how many cases would we have at a time? You start with one case. There are a few CASA volunteers that have more than one case, but that wouldn't be until you really feel comfortable. There might be some, like we have some that have a child that's on runaway, so there's not really much that they're doing, so they have another case as well. And if you're retired, you might have more flexibility and ability to take multiple cases. If you work, one case would be. But one case can be one child, or I think the most we've ever had is 8 children, 8 sibling group, 8? 7 children. Sometimes if there are that many children, we'll put 2 CASAs on it because it can be a little hard. Usually if there's 7 siblings, they're not in the same household, unfortunately. All right, any other questions?
When is the next scheduled orientation after the 24th?
So it'll be, go ahead, Eric. Yes.
I was gonna say, I don't know.
You mean the next class?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this is our last class of the year, and so we have not set our schedule for the new year yet, but I would anticipate probably mid-January would be when our next class would be, after we get past the holidays, just a tiny. And I mean, I want to believe that'll be in person, but it's January, still in probably flu season. I mean, it might be virtual still too, so. We'll see. But yeah, so this is our last one at the end of the year. And usually we do them on Thursday nights. This is our first Saturday. And so we'll see. Can you be a CASA in more than one county at a time? So that is completely up to the CASA program. So you could talk to the other CASA program. Sometimes if somebody comes from another county, and they did their training there, depending on the county, if we're familiar. I know most of the executive directors of the different programs, so if we're familiar, we might allow their training and not make you take another training, but we'd have you do court observation. Every executive director has a different approach, so you could reach out to them. If you complete our training, you absolutely can do it in our county, but I'm not sure. Effingham that's Atlantic area, right?
Geechee with Susie.
Oh, Geechee. Oh, Susie would totally yes. I mean, the nice thing about so now I'm stealing you from Susie. She's gonna be mad at me. So the nice thing about our CASA that's different than other surrounding CASAs is our court hearings have specific times. Those other jurisdictions, courts all day long. So you just go and wait. Here, you're like, you have a 9 o'clock hearing. It might mean your hearing doesn't start till 10, but it doesn't usually mean it's starting at 4. So you usually, so that is the one little perk about Chatham County. I mean, besides us. But Ogeechee is a wonderful program. I highly recommend them. But I would know that she would respect our training and allow you to also work in hers. All right. Anything else?
I'd like to highlight Genevieve's question again. I don't know if we really mentioned it earlier. So the whole point of CASA is that you have one advocate advocating for one sibling group. The legal system, DFACs, they're overwhelmed. Each of them have 30 plus cases that they're handling. They're expected to see all those children every month. So the power and beauty of the CASA program is that you, an individual, have one child, maybe 3 or 4 children that you can pour all of your love and energy into. And that's a capacity that our systems just don't have. So we're here to help build that capacity and show the judges what is really happening in a child's life in a way that a state employee really can't. So that's a really good question, and it's an important one. One case, if you really, really want it, we might give you a second one, but generally it's one case per CASA. Yeah, so you were a probation officer as well, Maria?
You and
It's
you and
hard.
Tim could exchange stories.
I bet.
Yeah, I was looking at that like, mm-hmm. I was totally agreeing with that comment.
All right, any other questions? All right, well, feel free to reach out to us if any more come up. Following this, later today, I'll send an email to all of those who registered with the recording and also a link to the application. But you also can very easily find the application on our website. Just go to volunteer application. And as soon as you submit that application, that will prompt our office administrator to set up an interview. And you'll have an interview set up with Holland, who is our outreach coordinator. And that is also a great place to ask any questions that come up now. Between now and then, she can answer a lot of your questions with you. And the interview is really both sides. You figuring out if it's a right fit for you and us figuring out if you're a right fit for the organization. As he did mention, we do have background checks. The only thing we're looking for on background checks is anything that has to do with children, right? If there's been any other minor or even slightly more serious offenses, if they have nothing to do with violence or children, you do you. I don't care about those things, just violence or children. And so we will have conversations about anything that might come up on any background checks with you. So fill out the application and that will start your process. Even if you aren't ready to do the October one, but you want to be considered for the January one, you can go ahead and fill out an application as well. And when you do your interview, you could just let them know that you'd like to be put on the waiting list for the next training if now's not the right time for you. All right. Thank you all so much for giving up your Saturday morning to us. We hope that you feel inspired and you think that this might be a right fit for you. We really want to hit 100% of the children served, and we need caring people like you to do it. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful day.